1. Fragments of silicon, only a few capacitors short of a motherboard.
Just as long as those capacitors weren't manufactured in the early 90s. Well, that's a long explanation that we don't have time for.
Yeah.
Well, being shy of them is never good.
True, but it's more, let's just say capacitors back in the early 90s didn't manufacture so well, and if you're a retro game collector, you might want to get those replaced.
Right.
Say TurboGrafx. Right.
Indeed.
So into the show we go. Welcome to another installment, second installment of the week for Fragments of Silicon.
Woo!
Yep. Yeah. So we did a Euro episode yesterday morning, and that got picked up in the news along with last week's episode. So that's good. But joining me as always is Galax.
Hello.
Eddie Fan.
Woohoo!
All right, Mario. Twilight.
Yo.
Right. So, Twilight. Why don't you go first?
Let's see now. This week, thought the most interesting thing worth mentioning is I cut my finger with glass.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, it was during work. There was some glass that got stuck on the side of a bottle, a glass bottle of Yoo-hoo, and not sure how that happened. It thankfully wasn't deep or anything like that, and kind of small. Still bled a bit though. Besides that, been playing the games for review this week. Playing some Final Fantasy 14, and that's about it.
All right, Galax.
Well, we had off work yesterday on account of significant amounts of sleet and slush and freezing rain. Unfortunately, I still had to go out to get to a doctor's appointment, but I survived. Actually, it wasn't too terrible by the time I was going out. But I still would have rather not. And that threw off a bunch of my other plans for this week, but I'll recover. Still playing Pokemon and looking at the games for this week, and not really a whole lot going on, I don't think. Sorry.
All right, Betty, you're up.
Still been trying to beat Digimon Cyber Sleuth before Next Order comes out.
Man, I want that game so bad, but I have nothing to play it on.
Yeah, I sent a request to Bandai Namco, but no response yet. Sometimes that just happens.
Yeah. Oh, well, I was thinking about buying it anyway, so whatever.
Yeah, I would get it anyway. The more we can encourage them to actually bring over Digimon games, the better. Because for a long time, they were, not doing that.
Yeah, like, we missed out on Adventure for the PSP, which sucks.
Yeah, I heard that was a pretty good game. We didn't get the last of the DS Digimon story games, unfortunately. Which was probably the most interesting one.
Other than that, I've been getting games played for the show, and also not a whole lot's been going on, other than making sure everything, tech-wise is burning around us.
Such is your duty in life now.
Yes.
What do you mean? It makes my job easier the less tech I have to deal with.
Yeah, just be glad you have someone on staff who knows this stuff.
Believe me, it was giant help last week. So I guess it's my. So last week saw the launch of season 12 of MSP. Yes, it actually happened. Although
only like a half hour late, even.
Yeah, it's like, what I expected to happen happened. It's like, Mac went into it like the day of the show. Looking at the YouTube streaming and all that stuff. And our testing was basically after this show last week. So that went about as well as you'd expect.
And spoilers, OBS isn't compatible with Mac's computer.
Yeah, well, that's because he uses a Macintosh.
Yeah.
And apparently OBS has some issues on that platform. So
Macintosh, it's not compatible with us.
So Petty Fan's handling the streaming on that show as well. Although Mac is apparently still going to broadcast that on TalkShoe.
At least he was talking about that.
I will say right now that Fragments of Silicon is done with TalkShoe in terms of recording.
Yeah. The audio version will still be sent there, but as far as live shows, nope.
Well, we probably could manage it, but that would require me to call in and stuff, and who knows.
Too much effort at this point, especially now that we have a working apparatus.
Also, the sound quality here is, better.
Yeah, it's like there's no reason for us to go back to that. It's a good, because people still listen to the recorded versions on TalkShoe and all the affiliated things there. So I see no reason to drop that while people are still listening to us. Low effort and increase our scope. Anyway, my week has been busy with show stuff, not just playing the games and all that stuff, but also setting up future shows. And let's see, I'm hesitant to divulge details, but it looks like we might be having another AAA publisher in the next couple months here.
Oh man, that's like at least one more A than usual.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it would be among the biggest, like maybe the biggest, if I'm thinking correctly. It's like I'm honestly not sure how it goes size-wise, but that's kind of immaterial. They're checking on team availability right now, so it still may not happen, but it's got more advancements and quicker than I thought it would. Just based on previous dalliances with AAA publishers. It usually takes a lot more convincing and a lot more energy to get them on the show, which is why you don't see them on too often.
Yeah, I still haven't heard anything back from my last effort on getting a AAA.
Well, granted, I think you were trying to go after Sonic Mania, and I don't think Sega is ready to talk about that.
Well, there was something else I don't want to talk about either, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like, well, I'm just remembering that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, I'd say try again when we know a firm release date and all that stuff. Anyway, let's see. Bit of advancement on the third show has been made.
We have maybe a title.
Yeah, it's like, well, Mac liked it. He said he told me that last night. It's just, when exactly we're going to move forward with it, hard to say. I mean, it's kind of incumbent on Mac's schedule, and if you haven't been listening to MSP or you didn't listen to the last bit of our show last week, he's gearing up for a massive crowdfunding campaign. I think it's launching in February, Valentine's Day. So that's taking up a lot of his time right now. So we're probably not going to move, you know, forward with the third show until, you know, his faculties are a bit clearer. At least that my estimation. This could change depending on Max wins, or
Yes.
how much.
Yes.
We could literally be doing it tomorrow for all we know.
Yeah, it's like hell, he might want to do some political stuff. Yeah, it's a political show mainly because MSP kind of got bogged down by politics. Not surprising, and
Yes, it's an official place to talk about stuff so we don't get sidetracked on MSP as much, mostly.
yeah, that's basically what that is. Also, we are planning a special multiplayer session of Hive Jump this Friday. Probably about like 8, 9, sometime during the evening.
Yeah.
It'll be our, we've done multiplayer sessions before. It'll be our first time at the official Fragments of Silicon Twitch channel.
Yeah. I still have some futzing around with the overlay I want to do before that. But yeah.
We got a couple of days. That's about. Oh, and right. Did I mention that we got into the news on air yet?
I don't believe you did.
Huh. Like it's been a busy week.
Well, you don't. I don't think you mentioned what news we got into.
Well, it's like, we mentioned the Switch on a couple of our shows previously, and it got picked up by one of the Nintendo blogs, Go Nintendo. Well, I sort of pointed them in the direction because they look for that stuff.
Dangled meat in front of them was the more appropriate thing.
They took it. Hey, they did their own transcribing.
We like it when they do that. It saves us a whole lot of time.
Yeah. The point is, it's been making the rounds. It's nothing major. It's not like some of our other news blow-ups, but it's it's more than we've had lately, if I'm thinking correctly. Anyway, so that's what's been going on here. I mean, personal news, not so much, nothing really to note. So merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of our program, and this week we have been trying to figure out how to pronounce your last name, Kurt, for a while, and is it Lo?
It's Loidl. It's pretty tricky.
Loidl.
I don't blame you.
Kurt Loidl and Victor Cepeda?
Cepeda, but close.
Okay. Yeah. And together they make the Dragonloft.
Oh man.
Yes. Right. So we usually like to start our interviews by learning the people behind the game. And our first question is usually, what first got you interested in video games?
Oh boy. You want to go first, Victor? You want me?
You can go first. I need to think back.
What, I don't have to think? Let's see. I started back on NES, probably. Some of the classics. Playing with my mom. I have fond memories of that. I think Snow Brothers was my first big-time game. I don't know if anyone knows that one.
I remember that game. I don't think I ever played it, but...
It's a little platformer. It's like 100 levels. There's like a boss every 10 levels. You roll up the enemies in snow and push them down the hill. That's probably where the push mechanics came from in Hellenica.
That explains a lot, actually.
Some deep-seated ideas here. But yeah, been playing video games ever since then. And I really got into tactics games once PSX rolled around. Obviously, Final Fantasy Tactics, Vandal Hearts was my favorite one. It's a little lesser known. What about you, Victor?
So I started also NES. I think Ninja Gaiden is the game I remember playing the most, though I don't know if I ever beat it, just playing obsessively till it reset my progress. And then I remember playing Kirby and Zelda on that system. And then like her at PS. I think we played a lot of tactics games together in high school, actually. I remember a few late night Vandal Heart sessions.
Yeah, so we met in high school. We went to school together, high school and college. So we'd known each other for a while, and we always wanted to make a game together.
Oh, wow. That's going back.
Yeah.
let's see. So I suppose that's answers the question of how you two met.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what jump-started your interest in making video games on a professional scale?
I just started making games since I first learned to program in 8th grade, and then at some point people started paying me for it, and that was a sizable improvement. But yeah, I guess that just as soon as I learned the program, I was like, oh, this is a thing I use to make games, and then started doing it.
Well, what sort of programs did you start out with, and what kind of games did you?
I had just like a TI-81, and on that TI-81 I made a like text RPG, which was like very simple, where you would like enter a number, 1 for attack, 2 for defend, or something similar. And then I think there were 3 different enemies that you could fight in it, and you would just fight the enemies and slowly level up. So that was just like all text, like you attacked, you dealt X damage, you were attacked, you took Y damage, just like very simple thing, and then kind of from there more and more complicated stuff.
Neat.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you made like a Zelda-like.
I made a Zelda-like. That would have been in high school, yeah.
Yeah, that was the first
sophomore
one I
year.
remember. It was pretty sweet.
Yeah.
It's like a full tile-based engine and everything.
Yeah.
And I was like programming tic-tac-toe or something in the corner.
Yeah, I was gonna say that certainly seems more ambitious than just recreating Snake or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Victor was hardcore back then.
Back then.
And did you go to college to, brush up on your video game creation skills?
Yeah, we both did computer science. I know Victor dabbled in math and physics stuff too.
Yeah.
I never got into that, but I think we both kind of knew that we wanted to go into video games after that. So programming was a good path for us to do that. And then we got lucky enough to find some positions professionally. It's a pretty competitive industry, but.
And right, so where did you work prior to the Dragonloft?
You want to? I can go first.
Yeah.
So when I was in college, I did a couple internships. I was over at EA a bit on the Origin team, helping out with Ultima Online, which was one of my favorites from back in the day. It's probably the game I've lost the most time to. So I was there for a summer. Another summer I was over at Bungie. I helped with Halo 3 a bit. And then after school I went over to Microsoft and worked on the Xbox publishing team. And so we helped basically first-party partners work on games like Fable 2 and Halo. And then eventually that got rolled into the Kinect stuff when Kinect was really big. So pretty much all the launch Kinect games I had a hand in to some degree.
And then
Victor?
my path's simpler. I just went to Volition and worked on Saints Row 2, 3, and then a little bit of 4, but then I left for Dragonloft.
Wow. So when was the Dragonloft founded? When did you two get together and formalize, making an indie dev?
2012, I think.
Yeah, it was 12 or 13, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think we might have like gotten started on ideas in 2012, but maybe not founded formally till 13.
And was Hellenica Tactics always the game you were planning on making, or were you planning on doing something else and you decided to switch over to making a SRPG?
What do you want to say to that, Victor?
Well, I mean, we had in the very early stages we were throwing around different ideas, and then we kind of settled on RPG, but we didn't want to have grind in it, and that kind of naturally led us towards tactics. So I think we had tried a few a few other prototypes, and then was just like, these we don't think are working as well, and we know that, or we think we can do a pretty good tactics take, so that's what we settled on there.
Yeah, I think the first rendition that Victor put together was more of a Fire Emblem style 2D tactics experience. And actually, Hellenica was totally 2D for the first year and a half, probably, which is kind of crazy if you look at it now. So it's come a long way.
It has. It's definitely more from the Tactics Ogre, Final Fantasy Tactics school of SRPGs.
Yeah, totally. I think that's mostly my fault. We kind of split off, and Victor took care of world building and writing and all the dialogue stuff and building out the branching narrative. And then I was focusing on the combat, and I have a soft spot for Vandal Hearts. So I tried to bring as much influence of that in as possible, I think.
Like, I never played Vandal Arms.
Vandal Hearts, it's a good one. I think it's pretty hard to find now, but
I've heard good things about, mixed things about the Vandal Hearts series. Like,
totally, yeah.
some
I
people-
think everything after 1 was pretty bad, but
That's basically what I've heard. It's like I'm not the biggest SRPG fan in the world, if only just
Sure.
because they usually are such a time sink.
totally, yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the things we were trying to combat.
Yeah, and there was sort of I don't know, personally I think it's a distressing trend where you look at things like Disgaea where they have infinite item dungeons and things like that, which is totally latching on to the concepts that I don't want any part of in those games. So yeah, totally hear where you're coming from.
It's like even simplified SRPGs or strategy. You don't necessarily have to have the RPG part, like advanced ones. They
sure.
can still take a while.
Totally.
So, how did you manage to parse this game down so thoroughly?
It's a good question. I think so interestingly, we were originally planning for releasing on tablet, and so a lot of our design decisions came around kind of optimizing around that experience, where your time commitment to each little play session is much shorter than, say, like a traditional PC game. So we were kind of shooting for having a loop that was maybe like half an hour. So you'd go to a town, talk to some people, figure out what your next quest line would be, and then when you pursue that, you go into a fight. You do the combat encounter, and then you're done in preferably half an hour. So that was kind of our goal. And then basically anytime we came to a design decision, we said, okay, well, how can we approach this in such a way to achieve that goal, right? And so that took us down a path of much simpler character progression. So it's about unlocking skills, customizing these story characters as opposed to leveling up and getting XP and upgrading your stats and all these other tertiary systems that those other games typically have.
Yeah, I think part of our thought was that the thing that's fun about having these systems is that you can build a unique party which will handle problems in a way that like sort of you customize them to be able to handle. So we kind of approached it for like, how can we get at that without bogging things down in a bunch of different systems. So we came up with our current system where you just unlock different skills, and each of those skills are very marketable departures. It's not like this skill does the same thing but hits a little bit harder. It's, oh, well, this skill is an AoE stun, or this skill knocks 3 people up, and unlocks a lot more ways to try the counters.
Yeah, I do like that the beginning skills are retaining their usefulness. And that's another hallmark of more traditional SRPGs or RPGs in general. That you progress, you get better powers.
Yeah, totally. So we definitely wanted to take sort of like a breadth approach to progression, so that instead of basically making your previous skills obsolete, it's more about filling out your toolkit And then when you approach a new level, you can think about what tools you have and then how it's best to approach it, or just pick things that match your play style, right? And they're not going to fall from favor because they're not as strong late game or something like that.
Now, was this the thought process that led to the branching pass system, or was it, just inspiration from Vanguard Hearts?
I'll let Victor speak to that one.
I think the process that led to that was poorly estimating how hard it would be. It's just like a thing that we liked when games were approaching that in games that gave you choices. We felt like that was cool, but it always kind of felt robbed, where like you made a choice and then maybe a scene is different, but then you're back on the main path. So we were thinking, well, let's do it where you have that choice, but then your path completely splits. You go a completely different way, meet different characters, have different adventures, and then we were gonna, like, we felt the tactics aspect of the game was a little bit more traditional, and then the like story branching was going to be more the way that we experiment and try to do something new in the genre. And in the end, I think both of them ended up being something pretty special.
It is pretty unique, I'll give it that. I mean, I actually got asked about the game on Steam today. Somebody was looking for, a tactics style game. Although I think they were kind of despondent that, when I told them it's a bit more parsed down than, say, Final Fantasy Tactics. I'd imagine that, it's a kind of a hard sell for, people who are really into SRPGs, because, there isn't all the micromanagement and there isn't the grand strategy that you get in, Fire Emblem, for example. But, that's not what this game is about.
Yeah, it's a bit different flavor. We've been seeing a lot of that in the reviews. People come in expecting, items and stats and job systems and things like that, which totally understandable. I loved those games too. But yeah, we took a different approach. I like to refer to it more like puzzle tactics. I think there's a lot of fun to be had experimenting with the options you have in each fight, just because you can coordinate your whole team's turn at once. And so it's about using your skills and coordination to find interesting combos and do a lot of damage that way. So it's much more, I don't know, I want to say like skill-based as opposed to sort of time investment based of grinding and making your character stronger in that sense.
Yeah, and like I said, I really do like the brisk pace. Like, we reviewed a strategy game last season, and good game, but it got to the point where it could get super tedious.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not even just like dealing with all the micromanagement of characters. It's like a hallmark of SRPGs are a lot of foes, and every foe takes a turn, and you have to sit through that.
Yeah, totally. So that's another nice sort of fallout of the design, is that since the turns are combined into a single action, gameplay just goes a lot more smoothly and quickly, which I appreciate. But
and was that hard to pull off? Getting everything basically simultaneous.
Yeah, I would say that was maybe the biggest technical challenge. So effectively, what you're doing as you play and you plan out your turn is you're constructing these timelines of actions, and each of your characters has their own timeline. And within those timelines, there's certain constraints, right? Because if, for instance, maybe I want Diona, the bear character, to run past a barrel and hit an enemy that's a little farther away, but actually right now the barrel's in the way. So first I need to grab Nephilim, the archer, and push that barrel out of the way, right? And so it's like understanding the constraint of, well, she can't go past the barrel until it's moved, so that needs to happen first. But I want them all to move simultaneously, so there's some disagreement there. So that was a fun challenge to work on. I think it works out pretty well in the end, though.
It does have another layer to tactics. In fact, I think that's the most unique aspect, the whole push and pull dynamic that's going on here. And you said that came from Snowbro.
That was just a joke. I never actually considered it, but it could be.
Well, I have no way of knowing until I ask.
I don't either. Maybe in my dreams or something I'll get an answer. We'll see.
Was that another challenge for the game, or was that a bit smoother?
Oh, I see. Yeah, I mean, there was certainly some technical challenge. I think the design side was probably more difficult. Initially, we had Diona, the bear character, and it just seemed obvious to me that she should be able to push enemies. I didn't even question it. But once I implemented that, then the questions started arising of, okay, well, if I push an enemy but there's a wall there, what happens? Or what if I pushed him and there's an enemy there? Or, what if there's a cliff? What should happen, right? And so I had to answer all those questions, and in doing so, we ended up with collision damage and fall damage, and actually the most recent addition is the bounce damage, which I think is the most fun, where
I couldn't exactly figure out how to work the bounce damage in my
Sure, yeah. Basically, there are some abilities that allow you to actually toss people, which is a little different than push, and that makes it simpler. You basically just, if you toss an enemy onto another tile that has an enemy, then they'll bounce off of them, and whoever they land on will take damage. And they'll keep bouncing in a line, actually, until they find an empty space, so you can set up some fun chains of bounces that way with your other push abilities. It's also possible to use push to cause a bounce. So basically, if you push someone from a greater height, when they fall down to a lower space, if there's an enemy there, they'll bounce off them as well.
Sounds meticulous.
Yeah, and that's where the puzzle aspect kind of comes in, right? A lot of our levels have a lot of verticality, and they're also kind of tight, and that's because we wanted you to be able to set up these interactions between your characters, right? So you have two people pushing different enemies together into a line, and then you have a third character that hops down and then tosses a final enemy onto both of them, and that's where most of the satisfaction comes from in the combat, I think. If you guys want to jump into combat, we could talk about it a bit. I was thinking you could do, there's a specific level. So if you open up that story map, I'm a little delayed, so this is going to be difficult.
Yeah.
That's the Twitch thing.
So the middle button on the top left is the story map. If you click on that, that'll show you all the paths. And so currently we're in Athens Acropolis, which has been converted into a train station because we're in the Steam revolution. So a lot of new technologies are entering. So that's part of the world building that we got going on. But if you look below that picture frame of the train, there are 3 combat nodes branching out of there. And you'll see there's 3 different shapes. There's a moon, a sun, and a spear and a shield. And those represent the different combat objectives, which I can talk about a little later. But I believe the first one, branching out of there on the left, was the one that I wanted to show you. Yeah, the one that travels to Rhodes. That first one.
Yeah, the one we have to do with the Persians bribing Greek bandits.
Yeah, there you go. So if you just hit depart, that'll take you into the combat sequence. It'll start off with a little cinematic that we can click through, and then I can talk about the combat.
Although one thing I do like is you have like a little encyclopedia in here for people who don't know like Greek mythology and whatnot. They can just click that, and it basically gives them a quick summation of what that is. Like this right here.
Yeah, totally. So Victor was super into history and historical accuracy, and he did a ton of research for this game, and so it's pretty true to history, actually, even though obviously many elements are fictionalized. But of course that means a lot of terms and names.
I don't think ladies transformed into bears.
There was however a ritual where girls who were worshippers of Artemis pretended to be bears. So it is based, and
that's the story of the Big Dipper, isn't it? Also,
which one?
Lady that Callisto was a lady who got turned into a bear and put into the sky, and then now she's the Big Dipper.
I do remember it being a bear that is in the sky. I don't remember exactly how, though.
I don't remember exactly why. No, I don't think she was one of the Cult of Artemis things, but it's another lady who turns into a bear.
Yeah, totally. There are
albeit involuntarily, I think.
Yeah, this is basically young girls worshipping Artemis, doing a specific ritual where they would wear bear skins, and that was sort of the inspiration for Diona's character.
Plus, Kurt has a thing for rangers.
I do enjoy the class. So actually, I don't know if you've done this already, but one fun thing you can do here to show off bounce is if you walk in between those two barrels, you can hit the lower barrel, and it'll bounce off that pirate and fall in the water.
Ah, I didn't know you could bounce barrels.
Yeah. So you get to use the environment to your advantage too, which is pretty great. And you can see on the left side, those are sort of the characters that you have to plan out their turns. And then on the right side, you'll see sort of the action queue. So he's put in an action for Diona.
Oh,
that'll
because
happen
I
first.
forgot this was like a sequenced type thing.
Yeah, because again, there are constraints potentially in the different actions if I push open a gap for you to walk through and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can kind of track your progress. And then I was really keen on allowing players to experiment a bunch, since it is sort of more of a puzzle game. And so I tried to make it simple for you to try some things out and then back it out if you didn't like what you're doing, and just make that interaction nice and snappy.
So I'm trying to figure out how to get the barrel to bounce on.
You can actually maul the barrel. So I was suggesting
Ah.
you just stand in between the barrels and then use your maul attack to hit it on top of the bottom
Oh,
pirate.
because the barrel's higher, it'll automatically
Yeah.
bounce.
Yeah.
And then you're up there, and
There's also a nice move where if you... So on this level, you're on this man named Makarios. You're on his ship. And so one of the cool things in Hellenica is as you travel around and approach different story events, you'll run into different characters, and sometimes they'll join you and become your ally for that fight. And so part of the fun of navigating the story is finding the fights with the characters that you like to fight with. And so Makarios is one of my favorites. He's all about tossing things because he's a shipper and a smuggler.
there it is.
So he actually has a toss ability where he can throw things forward 3 spaces. And there's an opportunity at the beginning of this level if you take him and kind of walk to the railing. There's a little rogue character, and you can toss him onto an archer at the front of the boat, and he'll bounce all the way into the ocean too. Tried to include some nice setups for people that are looking for those secret, satisfying solutions.
Well, it's a good way of teaching people that they exist too.
Totally, yeah. You might need to rotate the camera.
Yeah.
So you can
What's
use the
the-
buttons in the top left to rotate, or you can also
Yeah.
actually just press Q or E and it'll rotate as well.
Now, is this the rogue we're talking about? He looks kind of roguish.
Yeah, it's the little dude with the knife.
Yeah.
It's kind of skinny.
Ah, there we go. And then just random fighters.
Yeah, the enemies are kind of broken down into classes, so you can kind of know what to expect when you see them. So archers obviously have ranged attacks. Rogues tend to move farther, and they do piercing damage, which is more effective against heavy defense types. You don't have any of those right now, but the Spartan friend you get later on, for instance, is wearing armor, and so he's weak to piercing damage. And then fighters are kind of your standard fare. And then later on, there are larger enemies that will actually do pushes of their own, so that can catch you off guard sometimes.
I definitely got knocked into the water once.
Yeah, it can be a rough learning experience.
Is that a instant KO, or
Yes.
can you get
I-
back?
On most levels, it's an instant KO, I think.
Yeah, and Hellenica
Now, is
usually
there
when you get knocked-
permanent death in this game, or is like after you complete an instance, will any fallen party members return?
Yeah, there's no permadeath. Basically, if you survive the fight, then they'll come back and rejoin the story.
I have to say, this combat visually reminds me, in a good way, kind of the original Final Fantasy Tactics. And it does
yeah.
a lot of stuff that like later iterations of that kind of game often don't do, like the rotation and the really complicated. Like one of the things that annoyed me about some of the later Final Fantasy Tactics games was that basically on every stage the highest point was in the back.
Oh yeah.
and you couldn't rotate around and get on all sides of things very much.
Yeah, we have certain set piece levels where that's more the case. But I was a huge fan of having actual 3D environments and making that meaningful. I think that's fun.
Were you always planning on using 2D sprites as for the characters, or?
Yeah, I think again we took a lot of inspiration visually from Final Fantasy Tactics, as you just mentioned, and so we're both programmers, so our artistic sense isn't necessarily the most trained, but I knew that I liked how that game looked, and I knew other people would as well, and so we tried to hit as close to that mark as we could. And I think our artists did a pretty good job with the characters and the visuals.
It can be a little tricky to handle 2D sprites in a rotating thing, but you look like you did a pretty good job on that. It's not super hard, but obviously the sprites have to rotate differently than the actual thing does. They just get... I think what they usually do, and what looks like you did here, is that the sprites just, when you get past a certain point, they flip to the right orientation from that perspective.
Yep, you got it. Yeah, there are certain tricks you got to do. And actually, so the camera's tilted 45 degrees, right? Because it's an isometric view. And so there are some tricks that you do to make it pixel perfect. So like if I were to show you an image of the editor, for instance, you'd see that the sprites are actually, they're stretched vertically a certain amount. So if you look at them straight on, it would look funny. But because we're looking at them at an angle, it looks correct. So there's just some weird technical weirdness going on back there to make it work properly.
Now, was it just the two of you on this game, or did you have other people assist you?
Yeah. So the Dragonloft is just the two of us, and we did a majority of the project, but we contracted out most of the artwork because again, we're not artists. So things like the character portraits, the city backgrounds, a lot of this pixel art stuff, that was all done by artists.
And also we had friends helped us with stuff like UI and with additional writing and proofreading. So.
Yeah, and audio and music. So yeah, we certainly had a lot of support.
Well, that's good to hear. Now, this game was made with Unity, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Did you find it to be an easy engine to use?
Yeah, I really love working in Unity. I've been working in it for probably 5 years or so. It's very easy to get things up and running and playable, which I think is the most important part of game development, because that's when you can start answering questions and iterating on things.
Now, what version of Unity is this using?
We are actually on 5.3 in release, I think. It's funny because we started building this game a number of years ago, as we mentioned earlier. So we actually started building it in 4. something, and that was before they had their updated UI system, and it was missing a lot of features. So we've done a number of transitions over the course of the project.
I have heard from other developers that upgrading from Unity versions, especially like 4 to 5, is not the easiest thing in the world. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, they're a little bumpy. Fortunately, we're not doing too many graphically intense things because it's mostly a sprite-based game, so it wasn't that rough for us.
No, but I have played Unity games that get pretty graphically intensive, like Ori and the Blind Forest comes to mind.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, this game looks pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Pretty accessible in terms of kids. Plus, it seems to be optimized rather well. That's another thing about Unity games. They can often be unoptimized. We've run into those.
Yeah, sure.
So, always nice when one of these games plays smoothly and doesn't make computers smoke.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, how was the music created?
Yeah. A good friend of mine made it all. I think he uses Cubase, composed it himself. I can't speak too much to it because I didn't do too much of it. But
That's about what I expected. It's like usually when it comes to the music, there are very few who do the music themselves. Sometimes occasionally, but if there's an outsourced portion of a game, it's usually the music.
sure, yeah,
I mean, you play to your strengths.
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Anyway, right. Oh, what made you settle on steampunk Greece?
Go for it, Vicky.
So what first sort of got us excited about it was we had known about Heron's engine, which is an actual steam engine that the Greeks had built. They used it just, I think, in like temples. Like, oh, isn't that cool? You could use steam to make something spin. So no practical applications, but it was still kind of fascinating that they had that tech. And then we learned about I think it's called Antikythera mechanism, which was just this fantastically complicated, like mechanical clock that just looked about as intricate as the kind of stuff that you would see in steampunk art. So they had the steam power and they had the intricate gear work and just had never put it together. And sort of like that what if of what had put it together sort of got started. And then doing a little bit more research in ancient Greece, you just hear about like in an RPG, you'll frequently have different factions and nations and have characteristics that identify them and reasons for them to be in the conflict. And Greek history is full of that, about the ideologies of the Spartans versus the Corinthians versus the Athenians, and that proved to be a very fertile setting to build an RPG story on.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. Now, it is a shockingly underutilized setting. I'm being honest here. It's like, especially in like RPGs and branches thereof. Like, it's like it's usually ye old medieval times.
Mm-hmm.
Totally, yeah.
Right.
It's often overshadowed by medieval fantasy and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but still, like Greek settings, like getting Greek settings is still less common than say Roman settings. It's like, and
that's true.
yeah, I know the Romans acquired a lot of Greek culture, but the two aren't really the same. So it's nice. It's nice to see such a setting in a game. And so, how did you come up with characters? And indeed, is it always the same characters that you get on each pathway, or do they, do you always get the Spartan, and so on and so forth, no matter which branching path you take?
The 4 base characters in the party, the ones that you get to keep with you, those are the same regardless of path, but the characters who will join you for a combat path, those will vary. Like on the level we just played, we got Makarios because he's a shipping captain and a smuggler, and you happen to be traveling on his ship. And then there are other fights throughout the game where you might also encounter him. So those characters will be different depending on the path.
That's about what I thought. Like, main characters are main characters. Supporting characters show up, depending on the situation. Now, how long would you say an average playthrough would take? Because from what I've seen, it looks like it takes about there are like 9 days of questing.
Yeah, so the structure's kind of interesting, right? I talked earlier about the loops, right? We tried to shoot for a half an hour for a sort of story combat loop. Depending on your speed, that can vary a bit, but essentially what happens is you'll play through a path up into a certain point, and then we have a story event that I don't really want to talk about. But basically, a single path will take you, anywhere from like 6 to 8 hours. And then if you're trying to just rush through the game and beat the final, encounter and win effectively, that might take you. What were we saying, Victor? I think it was like.
I
7.
think 7.
Yeah.
I think is like if you absolutely rush it, you could probably do it in 7. I think
Yeah.
a more
Okay, I think I got my
reasonable.
numbers wrong. A single path is like more like 3 to 5 hours, and then if you wanted to rush it, you can. If you just do 2 paths, you can actually win the game. It's just pretty difficult, and so that would take 7 to 8 hours. But the thing is, all of the paths have unique combat encounters. It's not like they're really sharing the fights. So if you wanted to play all of the combat encounters and see all the unique content, you'd ultimately end up doing most of the paths, and that could take you 20 plus hours. We had some of our testers who were trying to 100% the game, and they were beyond 40 hours. So
Sounds about right. Right, so we're getting low on time here, so just a couple more questions.
Sure.
Given that this game is in Unity and given all the design choices, could you bring this game to, say, consoles, handheld, mobile, what have you?
Yeah, one of the really nice things about Unity is that it's incredibly portable. So we only launched on PC and Mac. I'm sure it works on Linux. We just didn't have a Linux box to check it. It's definitely playable on a tablet. I've played it recently. Converting to console would technically work. We'd have to do a little bit of work for controller support and kind of modifying UIs to play more nicely with the controller, because a lot of it was intended to be driven by touch or just a mouse pointer alone. But that's not a difficult challenge. So yeah, it's certainly possible that it could be on consoles.
And so have you been working on this game for like 4 years now?
Yeah, something like 3.5, 4 years.
Right, and so given how the market is these days, are you concerned about Hellenica getting, swallowed by the tides, as it were? It's like on Steam, there are just so many games coming out these days, and aside from like appearing on our show, how do you plan on keeping this game in the public view space?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough, right? Especially when you don't really have any prior brand recognition or anything like that. Part of the strategy that we used was that we wanted to recreate that iconic FFT aesthetic, because we thought that at least the visuals then would grab people's eyes. So that helped us get through Greenlight, for instance. We got through a lot more quickly than most no-name indies do. But still, I think it's foolish to expect that much success without a lot of hard work and a lot of time on the marketplace. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, I think.
True. I will say that you probably have a better chance than a lot of other games, if only because, it stands out more than, say, a retro-styled platformer or a rogue. You don't see too many Final Fantasy tactics ogre-derived SRPGs out there.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I think there's a dearth of these types of games on PC, which is pretty unfortunate. You've seen stuff like Disgaea was ported over, and Disgaea 2 is actually coming out next week. So some of them are starting to creep over, but those games are like 10 years old, But, hopefully as more of these things come out, people start supporting them, there'll be more money in the space, and then maybe we'll get some more. That'd be great.
Indeed. And I think that's about it for me. Guys, do you have any final thoughts or questions that you wish to ask our guests?
No.
Not me. No, I haven't gotten a chance to play this yet, but it does look like a lot of fun, so I'm looking forward to trying that out before we review it.
Great.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks so much for having us on your show. It's been a
Yeah,
pleasure.
definitely.
No problem. Yeah, so the game is Hellenica Tactics. We're reviewing it this Sunday. It's available on Steam, at PlayStation. Not PlayStation. Right.
Someday, maybe.
PC and Mac.
Yeah,
And-
you can get it on itch.io as well if you're not a Steam person.
Right, and it's on itch.io, and it's $14.99, correct?
It'll be $14.99 this week, sort of a launch special, and then we'll go back to $19.99.
Okay, so if you want to, a bit of a discount, be sure to pick it up before Monday at like 1 o'clock. It's like
Yeah.
the official time Steam sales end. And right, glad to have you both on our program and taking time out of your schedule.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks again.
No problem. All right, Petty Fan, play us to the next section. All right, so welcome to year 47 of our Switch coverage. I don't know,
Yeah.
it's just we've been talking about this, the Nintendo Switch in a lot of context recently, and just because the information dumped from 2 weeks ago at this point was so massive, and news has been filtering out, although it's starting to taper off now.
Well, for
It's
now.
more- Well, starting to, but for example, the Tomorrow Corporation announced that 3 more games are going to join the Switch line at launch, for example.
Mm.
And I have one of the more.
It's
recent,
good. It's good whenever the launch library gets better. That's less for people to complain about.
Hmm.
But, people will complain for various reasons. They'll complain that they're digital only, or they're not the games they're interested in. Yada yada yada.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So where did we leave off on our Switch discussion last week?
I don't remember exactly, but it involved Nintendo doing something and people not being happy about it. I'm kidding, because that's the entire
That's pretty
thing.
much everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't recall where we left off either. I think we just were in the middle of the event itself we were talking about.
I think we were talking about the launch lineup.
Yeah, we'd already done some talking about specs and price and stuff,
Yeah.
of which we still don't know everything about the specs.
Well, it's like we don't really. I think we talked about this last week, but all we know about the actual specs is it's based off of NVIDIA's Tegra chipset.
And we don't even know which Tegra.
Yeah, it's like this is kind of a thing that Nintendo does.
Yeah, we
We're
literally
not-
won't know the chip they're using until iFixit pulls the damn thing apart.
Yeah, it's like I'm fully expecting the Digital Foundry to take this thing apart, and not just the Switch itself, but all of the controllers, to look at all the tech, because that's the kind of thing they do.
Yeah, because if these were like regular controllers, they probably wouldn't bother. Like the PS4, like the revision that I don't think they took apart, but
Yeah.
with all the new tech supposedly in the Joy-Cons, that might get a teardown.
Right. I forget if we talked I think we talked about pricing, sort of, but
Like $80 for the Joy-Cons and $300 for the console.
yeah, I'm like, I don't think we had gotten to the online service.
Yeah.
So that's one of the bigger points of contention. Like, it's because, well, Nintendo embracing modernity has its downsides. So you're gonna have to pay for multiplayer on the Nintendo Switch.
Well, unless online multiplayer.
So if you're gonna have to buy into that if you want to say play Splatoon 2 to the fullest extent. The upside should be at the minimum, like better net code, better lobbies, Unfortunately,
apparently
Well-
it's going to use a smartphone app for matchmaking.
I was about to say, the smartphone application is going to be at the very least for voice chat, and it's a paid app at that. See, this is the kind of shit that really pisses people off about Nintendo. You know, it's like we know the official rationale for this app, and it's because the Switch is a portable console hybrid. It's assumed that you're not going to have your Switch, in front of your TV at all points. You're gonna like have it on the go. And
we also don't know if the Switch even has a microphone itself yet.
Yeah, I'm like, the thing of it is I'm like, so did Nintendo not figure out how fucking awkward this is gonna be? Because you're gonna have the Joy-Cons in one hand, and you're gonna have your smartphone in another hand.
Well, I'd imagine you'd be able to use like a wired or wireless headset with your phone, but still.
But still, that's an extra step.
Yeah.
My point
Yeah,
is,
I'm not exactly what you'd say thrilled about that. So.
Yeah, my point is, instead of having it on the Switch, in the Switch where it should be, they did this insanely roundabout solution that just makes them look like the slack-jawed yokels that they usually look when it comes to technology sometimes. Especially internet technology. It's the same annoyance and downright hatred that's fueling the fact that there are going to be no non-game apps at launch. The eventual rationale is Nintendo has been focusing so much on the games part of the Switch that stuff like Netflix, YouTube, all of the expected TV and internet apps aren't going to be there at launch.
Well, right now it's possible they could strike a deal and be on a day one update. I mean, we still have till March.
That's possible, but that's where it lies right now.
Yeah.
On the one hand, not having that stuff there is kind of diminished because, like say Netflix. I mean, are you really buying a Nintendo Switch for Netflix? Probably not.
Yeah,
especially
my Wii U has Netflix, but I don't really use it on there.
I'm not saying that not having Netflix on it is a good idea, because it's not. But I did hear some of the most back-ass words reasoning on this from someone who was reviewing the Switch and complaining about it. And the complaint was, and I quote, "The TV I just got has Netflix in it. Why doesn't the Switch?"
That's kind of where we're at in terms of these apps. It's just expected that you have these things.
Right, but if it's built into your TV, why do you need it on the Switch? I guess if you were using it elsewhere, but...
Yeah, it's like on the go,
Then you'd have to deal with the internet connection of wherever you are, too, I guess.
Right, but like my smartphone is compatible with Netflix. My tablet, not any of my TVs because I really don't have the need for a modern TV. Plus smart TVs are incredibly terrible from what I've heard.
Yeah.
So, people are up in arms because, they're not there when they should be there. But, it's not the lack of a selling point that it used to be. Like, especially since, when it comes to Netflix, the Wii used to be a Netflix box. Like, a good portion of Wii owners, I guess after they got tired of Wii Sports, converted into Netflix boxes.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the reasons why the Wii Mini has sold like shit, because it doesn't have Netflix support.
Or
Yes.
any. I don't know why they would ever do that. The Wii Mini. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
Cheaper.
Yeah.
And cheaper revisions tend to miss stuff. It's been like that, going all the way back like to Genesis.
Yeah, like my PS4 Slim, they took out the optical audio port, so if I had like a really high quality pair of headphones, whatever, I couldn't use them.
Yeah, so stuff like that gets tossed aside in the name of cost reduction. Like, in terms of the Switch, I'm not sure what they would, what revisions would look like.
If it will get one, because the Wii U never got one.
The Wii, well, that's because the Wii tanked so hard that Nintendo couldn't wait for it to be.
That's what I mean. This Switch might also tank so hard and may not get a revision as well.
It's possible, but I'm looking more at it from not just a modern console perspective, but Nintendo's own handheld history. Like, how many revisions are we on the 3DS now?
Original, XL, 2DS, new 3DS, new 3DS XL, so 5.
Yeah. So Nintendo has a history of doing this.
And don't get us started on how many editions the GBA got. We'll be here for a while.
Was it really that many?
I'm not sure, but that's a topic for another time.
Yeah.
But the overall point is, you could definitely see lower cost versions of the Switch appearing. Like, I don't know what they would remove, or a like.
Yeah, this seems to have, especially since everything is all in one thing. It seems like it might be difficult to significantly reduce parts of.
Yeah, I almost wonder if a revision would be like a graphics adapter almost in the dock thing to like give it more power.
I would guess that was up to the Nintendo and NVIDIA engineers. I mean, yeah. So I think a news story that came out last week was that the full Joy-Con controller was intentionally designed to look like a puppy.
Yeah, I heard the mixed results on that one. That it was at least something that they thought of or thought was a good idea.
Well, I've seen it like an actual, Joy-Con dog plushie, handmade.
Yeah,
still.
that was fan made, but yeah.
But still, and so the Joy-Cons are coming in 2 flavors. They're coming in your basic black, and they're coming in, for some reason I still haven't figured out, like fire red and ice blue or something like that.
I think they're supposed to be like Mario red and blue, but yeah, like
It's I think it's just called neon red and neon blue. Honestly, neither one of those colors does anything for me at all, and I would rather have them, as I think they are also available. You can get wrist straps in those colors.
Yes. Although the thing is, you're getting one of each. You're getting one blue controller, you're getting one head controller, and the Switch is still black. So, if color coordination is your thing, this is going to drive you absolutely up the wall.
Yeah, I suspect that's intended for people who prefer to do 2-player things.
yeah.
And it doesn't appeal to me at all, but I guess I can see it appealing to some people. Neither here.
I guess. I mean, I honestly don't know. Like, Nintendo figures there's a market for this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Even though.
Well, and I think they mentioned that other colors will come later on.
Of course they will. That's been Nintendo's since literally the original Game Boy. Like the second release of the original Game Boy, Nintendo's been doing a lot of playing around with colors of their systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will concede that it has at times made me at least seriously consider purchasing another version of a system I already have because, damn, I really want the one with the pretty Pokemon art on it, or damn, that galaxy pattern looks cool.
Pikachu is coming. Protect your wallet.
I'm not a big fan of the Pikachu systems, but they have this thing that they've done with most of the DS things, where for each generation of Pokemon, there's one that has the 2 version legendaries either in gold on black, or for the black and white ones, there was a black one and a white one, and it was just in gloss on a matte system. And those all looked really good to me.
But yeah. Time will tell if, like, the Switch console itself will have, you know, different colors, or if it's just the Joy-Cons.
It probably will eventually.
Yeah.
But also it depends on how well it does.
Yeah. As far as third-party support goes, I'm trying to think how much of that we talked last time. So it's actually kind of hard to gauge where third-party support lies, because it's not just, for example, like Bethesda. Like, you know, Bethesda was nowhere near the Wii U at any stage.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember Bethesda mentioning that, you know, because they weren't included, like, early on, they just had no interest in the Wii U. This is before the entire enterprise crate, mind you. You know, that is another thing that they have to avoid. It's not, you know, just, hey, EA has provided you with a FIFA game, and that's it.
Unprecedented partnership.
It's like, you know, okay, Bethesda's providing you with Skyrim, but, you know...
Don't make it be the only game they give you.
Right. You know, this is gonna be a bit of a challenge because, okay, you know, people are kind of exaggerating the discrepancy between the PlayStation 4 and say the Switch. Yes, the Switch is lower powered than the PlayStation 4, especially the PlayStation 4 Pro, but, you know, remember,
it's also
Nintendo
not really doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's also, you know, people really overlook the fact that, you know, this is a portable console kind of thing. Like, you know, it's made for gaming on the go as well. So that had to be factored in. So even if, like, Nintendo was using, like, maybe even the most advanced tech, it still probably wouldn't have been as powerful as a PlayStation 4 Pro. Just because of how portable design works.
Yeah.
You know.
Like, they might be able to get it to, you know, regular PS4 levels. At least docked. Because I don't know if we mentioned this, but the Switch will have more power available when it's docked than opposed to when it's just in tablet mode.
Yeah, maybe not like processing power as such.
The
but
GPU
more
clocks up to full speed when it's docked, is what I have
Right.
heard.
Yeah, like there's not like extra chips in there, but it draws more power to do more.
Though now this is my inner tech nerd coming out, but depending on how the USB port is set up, the Type-C, if it allows for Thunderbolt, then technically later on they could introduce a dock that has a better graphics card in it to do 4K and whatnot. But
Interesting thought.
that's one of those we're going to have to find out what exactly port they're using on Type-C.
Yeah, and also it'll depend on what their goal is with that.
Like, yeah, it could be in like 2 years or whatever. Hey, a new Switch dock's out with beefier graphics card. Hey, you can now play Breath of the Wild in 4K.
I'm like, wasn't really designed for 4K, but...
Well...
And keep in mind, here's the thing: like 4K, like 4K would definitely be a television thing because. So if you don't know how 4K works, it's not really for the actual Switch screen.
Yeah, the Switch
No.
screen
Oh no,
is 720.
the screen does not physically have that many pixels on it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And having a 4K screen at that size wouldn't make much sense, actually.
It'd make you go cross-eyed is what it would do.
Yeah. I'm like, 4K is meant for very, very big screens.
Like, if this was a 10.1-inch screen, you might be able to get away with 4K. Just because the way you would be normally holding it. But, like, was it 6-inch?
I think about like 6, 7 inch, thereabouts.
Yeah, for that,
And
4K, any text would be illegible.
Yeah, and from the impressions I've heard, that the actual Switch screen is really, really sharp, really good. You know, apparently even better than the Vita screen. That's
Yeah.
significant because, though I'm not sure which Vita screen they're talking about because, all right, more screen talk. The Vita had two kinds of screens.
Yeah.
The original had
Two.
OLED.
Mhm.
And the newer versions have regular LCD screens.
Spoilers, if you have the original PSP, you have the original Vita, you have the correct Vita.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, yeah. OLED had a sharper image than LCD. You know, I didn't care for them because screen burning was so common.
Yeah, like, one thing that makes OLEDs, like, the better option, I guess, is because black pixels are off. That's really what makes them so sharp.
Whereas on an LCD, you can't turn the individual pixel all the way off.
Right. So, if the brightness is up too high, blacks can almost look like a faded gray. Anyway.
Man, I was still planning on maybe getting a Vita at some point, but I don't know.
Let's see.
Sorry, that was a
I
sidetrack.
think we talked about the launch lineup, at least the launch lineup as it was then.
Right.
And
Yeah. There's
it's
not a
coming
whole
out-
ton. We said there's not a whole ton on day one, but there's
Yeah,
a good
it's-
amount in the first week and then in the first month and then more throughout the first year, so.
Like I said, you're probably buying the Switch for Zelda.
At least at the moment.
Yeah. It's like, I guess, unless you have a Wii U, and I'm like, people are trading in Wii U's for Switches because the Switch has a future and the Wii U doesn't.
Yeah, like, I still might keep my Wii U just because
But, like, Nintendo.
my family likes the Wii original games, so instead of having to buy and set up a Wii, just use the Wii U.
Well, Nintendo has formally come out and said that Breath of the Wild will be their last Wii U game. They'll still be supporting games like Mario Kart 8 and Splatoon, the online, and you still have indie games coming out for the system for a while.
And I'd imagine they'd be having some virtual console games still coming.
Yeah. But as far as new projects, no. That is...
They've moved on to the next thing.
Yeah. Now, they've said that the 3DS isn't going to be retired. I'm like...
At least nowhere near as fast, which makes sense because the 3DS is, pretty successful.
Yeah, to be fair, hasn't the like 3DS almost sold as many units as the frickin' PS2?
No.
I thought it has. Like, I know
Oh,
it sold
no,
a
no.
lot of units.
Not even the original DS is sold as much as PlayStation 2. I think the PlayStation 2 is the highest selling console of all time.
Hmm.
It's certainly up there. Like, no, it's like the 3DS has only done about half to 3/4 of those kind of numbers at best. Like, mobile really reduced its market share.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I want to wrap up this discussion so we can get prepared for MSP. Final thoughts on the Switch as it is in this moment in time.
It looks interesting, but I'm probably not going to get it at launch just because I just bought a PS4. So I really don't see it, running out and getting a Switch at this moment, especially because only thing I'd want for it is Zelda, and I can get that for my Wii U for $60 instead of $360 for a Switch and Zelda.
I'm more inclined to ask for it for my birthday in April. I don't really feel, especially since there are apparently some difficulties with pre-orders and stuff for launch.
Like,
And
I
like
think everywhere is
Pro
sold
Control,
out.
yeah, and the Pro Controller sold out in some places, and so I'm more likely to try to get it in April than right at launch. But I am looking forward to what we've heard so far.
Looks promising, but at the moment, I'm not exactly interested in it, and Zelda would be available for the Wii U, so yeah.
All right, so that'll about do it for this week. Fragments of Silicon. Be sure to tune in for Moonhawk Studios Presents coming up in about a half an hour here. Now this is streamed on Twitch. That's streamed on YouTube. So I think the URL is what youtube.com/Mr. Palladino.
I don't remember. We should have asked Mac for that before we went live.
Yeah, something like
Next week.
Yep. And next week I'll remember to keep it somewhere.
Yeah. We're still getting used to the new apparatus over there, so bear with us.
I
Right,
will
as far
post
as-
the link in the chat here once we figure out what it is.
Actually, that isn't it for the week. We have the high jump multiplayer session on Friday to do, and then we start next week with our reviews of both Hellenica Tactics and High Jump. We have a Tuesday morning interview to do next week. Philip Brock of THQ Nordic Games is supposed to rejoin us then, although I haven't heard back from him. I'm not sure if it's going to be him or somebody else.
And hopefully we don't lose this goddamn interview.
Yeah. And next week on the Alpha Show, we'll be having Zachary Downer of Or Creative LLC. He is creating a game called Ira. I think this is an adventure game. I'm not exactly sure. More on that next week. So until various points throughout the week, and if you're joining us on the MSP over there, I wish you a good game.